Hello everyone and welcome to another race at the Red Bull Ring, and as you can see we got a mandatory one stop. I know this is not the best race that we had and the last week was pretty great, so I'm not going to complain right now. I think, well, I would say that I really hope that the next week is going to be a little bit better than this one, but I just wanted to point this one out if you're still racing in here. So this is my first race. I started in first place, Lev was behind me, and we had a pretty interesting race in here. So he was always very close, I would say maybe even half a second behind, and just a couple of laps later from the start of the race we were really pushing. I know this car is quite stable, but at this point I realized that some of the turns are not exactly as stable as I wanted them to be. So I went defensive into this turn, just trying to cover down the inside. I thought, you know what, he's not gonna go on the outside, but you know, as usual, I tried to leave as much space as I possibly could on the outside, and he made it stick. So eventually he got into the first place of this race, and now I was in second. Now I was the guy who's chasing. So as you can see, the gap wasn't that big. I didn't really want to send it, but he got a half a second penalty. You will see that penalties in this one are very important. You just want to avoid them, because a half a second penalty in this race isn't a half a second penalty. You will start to lose a lot more time. But exactly this, what you can see right now, is the problem with this race, and I know it's quite a struggle for most of the guys that are racing in here. You can see that sliding, and I just try to slow it down so you can see the slide with this car, which is usually quite stable, and this is exactly the reason why 0 degrees Celsius, so it's really cold. The Mazda is usually a pretty stable car, and you don't even have to think about is it going to slide or not, because it's, once again, it's as stable as a rock. But in this race it was quite the opposite. You can see Lev kind of sending it down the inside. I think I left him a little bit too much room. I think I could have kind of went a little bit more defensive in here, but now you will start to see the big problem that he had. He started to slide quite a lot. Eventually, like the first couple of laps before you pit, the tires getting really cold. So the rear tires of this car are getting extremely cold, which is making usually very stable Mazda 3 car, as you can see here, a much unstable car. Once again, we're going back into the lead. I'm just trying to get back into the lead, going on the outside of turn 2. You know what, I said, you know, I'm just gonna try to do a little bit different line this time. It didn't work, but now I got the slipstream for the next section. So I believe now the problems really started for him. And it was, well, eventually it was about, pretty much, it's all about the cold tires and keeping the car steady and stable in the straight line, and then eventually letting it roll into the turn. He kind of missed this one a little bit, went slightly too defensive, I would say, missed his line, and then I just got on the outside of this turn. So you can see I'm not exactly pushing to the limit. I'm not trail braking as much as I possibly could. Fourth gear on the way out to stabilize the car. We went really into it. This was actually a pretty good race that I had. So the cars are sliding, but we're trying to keep it under control. And as I said before, if you ever did this race, you know how difficult it is to keep the car under control, even with a different setup. So it's an extremely difficult thing to do. Once again, I'm trying to have a little look. You can see that wobble starting, so it's lap 8 out of 11. The tires are getting really cold. So once again, before you pit, the laps are kind of okay, because it's the first stint. The tires cannot get really that cold. But in the next stint, this one, in the last 2 to 3 laps, the rear tires are extremely cold, and it's very difficult to even keep the car on the road. You can see once again, out of the last corner, slides quite well. I would actually say quite a lot of sliding out of the last corner, and once again we are really fighting for this first place. I'm trying to go on the outside, kind of getting a wider line. He misjudged, I think he misjudged his braking point in there, went slightly too wide, which again gave me the inside line for the next corner. So it's pretty much a drag race right here, and I will try to cover down the middle of the track as much as I possibly can. You can see I'm still on the right. I see that he cannot really go that much on the right. He doesn't have enough space to send it, and then I just try to cover down the inside, and once again I got myself into P1. So this was actually looking like a really good race, and now, yeah, it's pretty much keeping it as stable as I possibly can in the middle of the track. He tries to send it, but now he leaves me a little bit too much space. I would say he probably could have sent it a little bit more. Once again, I keep the lead, and once again I cross the finish line. It is P1 in this race. Quite a good one. I think actually one of the best races that I had. But this is the start of the show. These are the starting temps in Celsius when you start the race. And those temps for the first couple of laps are keeping the car stable and in line. So you don't really have to think too much about the stability of the car, and you can just go flat out. Use normal lines like in the qualifying. But then later, just after a couple of laps, you can see the sliding really starts. So you have to be careful on how you use the curbs, when you use the curbs, when you're starting to trail brake, how much trail braking are you using, and all of those other aspects that no one is usually thinking about. And now, when we got such a unique, I would say this is a very unique race because Mazda is OP, and I guess if you're not using the Mazda, you're simply not competitive, and that's, I guess, the problem. With most of the other cars, this wouldn't be that much of a problem, but Mazda has such a unique turning point, which is, well, sometimes you actually need a bit of rotation, but not exactly this much rotation out of some turns. But you can see, once again, Damien got a half a second penalty. I'm starting to slide myself, and it's 4th lap, so the tires, once again, are getting really cold at this point. And he serves his penalty, so as I said before, half a second penalty isn't really half a second penalty. It's more like a 1 second penalty, or like 8 to 9 tenths. It's quite a lot when you think about it, just for half a second penalty. But then when I got into the pits, I checked my temps on the screen, and they were just awful. Once again, you know, we are just going for that first place. This was once again a very good race, very competitive race. You can even see the lap times. I did 1:34.4, and he's just behind me. And at this point, when I was shooting this video, he is the first guy on the leaderboards, but once again he picked up a half a second penalty. So I don't even need to defend at this point, because otherwise, I mean, he can send it, he can push me out of the track. So I'm just trying to play this kind of as a smart game. Don't put that much trouble to him, let him pass, and then eventually when he serves the penalty, I'm gonna retake my first place and I'm gonna retake that lead. So once again, half a second penalty, not exactly working for him in the right way, but he was really pushing in this race. And just as I said, it's really easy to make a mistake, and it's really easy to get that penalty. And half a second penalty is not half a second penalty, it's a lot more. So I just wanted to kind of explain what exactly is necessary to stop that sliding as we move on, because you can see that even Damien, who got the first lap on the leaderboards, on the global leaderboards, basically holding a world record, is kind of struggling to even keep this car on the road. I know it's quite difficult, but everything, as you can see, is pretty much all about staying on the track, not making a mistake, and keeping the car in line, not picking up the penalty. So the base of, well, all of this is getting the right setup, and you can find it in the link down in the description. So the right setup, the race setup as we usually call it, is pretty much what stops the rotation through the corners. It's a little bit less aggressive, but also try to avoid using the curbs too much. Usually in the qualifying I would use that green stuff on the right, but now I'm just using the curb. And now when the acceleration starts, this is actually the crucial point where you need to start accelerating to stabilize the car. But one of, well, I would say one of the most important parts is do not turn and brake. So forget about trail braking. You can trail brake a little bit. Most of the braking needs to be done in the straight line. And then if or when the car starts to slide, add just about 5 to 10% of power to stabilize that back end of the car. So here you can see once again, it's just the last lap of the race. We're really pushing at this point. Everyone wants to get that win, I guess. But now in this last couple of corners, you can really start to see the difference. So I'm not using the green stuff on the right. I'm not trail braking that much. I'm stabilizing the car with a little bit of power. And this, once again, as I said, do not trail braking into this one. Brake in the straight line. You can see 5 to 10% of acceleration going in. Maybe sometimes it's not even a 10%, it's just a little bit of stabilization of that back end done with just about 5% of acceleration. So it's really not much, but it kind of stabilizes the car. So if you want to go from the beginning, it's just about the setup. Do not use the curbs that much, do not trail brake, and then eventually if the car starts to slide, you can put in, I would say, maybe 5 to 10% of acceleration, and the car will become stable. And once again, I got the win out of this race, and yeah, those are the advices that I can give you if you want to win in this race. So guys, I really hope that you enjoyed in this one. Please let me know what you think about this down in the comments, and if you got, once again, if you got any additional questions, please let me know.